Please subscribe and hit the like button.
Well, good evening. Welcome to Yada Yahweh Radio. It's an interesting week. We had, this past week, we had the president telling us that the solution to a sinking economy that was sunk because of our response to COVID, not because of the disease itself, was that we needed to spend big. It's nothing says business success more to me than borrowing money that you don't have and that you could never pay back. Doesn't that sound like prosperity to you?
Well, if that don't work, I don't know what will.
But yes, let's just borrow more money that we have no chance of paying back. You know, another they used to a bill that was a couple of $3 billion was considered a big deal. And now they're at $1.9 trillion after having already spent $4 trillion on a year ago, and then another trillion not too long ago, and now we need another $2 trillion. Just continue to spend money that we don't have that we can never pay back, and pretty soon we'll be debt free and everything will be hunky dory, right?
You hear that? We'll be out of the hole eventually. Huh?
Yeah, it's just perfect. The Biden administration has essentially reversed everything that Trump did over the years. So the good things, which were getting diminishing our involvement with the United Nations, which is so anti-Semitic and so anti-Israel, including WHO. The World Health Organization, we're back in. The Kyoto Climate Accords, which were a disaster for the U.S. because they're nothing but socialism, wealth redistribution. He signed us right back up for. So it's we had essentially bankrupted the country with all of the liberal agenda that was so counterproductive to the economy, and so the first thing they decided to do was double down on everything. It is very sad for our country that we're being this self-destructive and haven't got a clue as to why what we're doing is so counter to what is in the country's interest. I heard that Biden's biggest challenge was the 10 million jobs that need to be created for those who were unemployed, and the thing he wants to do is affect minimum wage. Well, see, if you raise the minimum wage, what you're going to do is reduce jobs. But, of course, that doesn't make any sense. And, of course, what you could do is what FDR did, which I'm sure he would love to do. FDR made the Great Recession last 15 years because he decided to raise taxes on the wealthiest.
The rich.
And he raised taxes to the point they were like 70% and higher. And so nobody had any incentive. Some places, it was 90%. No one had any incentive to make any money. Why would you want to do that? Why would you want to work so the government got 90% of your efforts? People that had the means to invest and run businesses and actually could have created jobs had no interest in doing so. And so all he did was deepen the recession. There's also news out of Washington that the murder rate in the United States has escalated dramatically. I guess Black Lives Matter didn't matter. And no one seems to like COVID lockdowns very much. I read another news report that was out today that there are now 200 million women that we know of who have had sexual genital mutilation. 200 million. So Washington is focused on let's impeach a president that's no longer in office because we're paranoid of his people returning back to the Capitol. Remember, they brought in tens of thousands of Army troops. They put up huge fences around everything. They were absolutely paranoid that these Trump-waving protesters were going to come back. And, of course, there was no one there anywhere. it was all for naught. And, well, now they want to impeach a president that's not even in office anymore, and no one said a word about the 200 million women who've had their genitals mutilated only because mommy and daddy want to sell them off in a forced marriage and pick up some extra dough. Women have so little rights that their own parents would mutilate them for profit. Now, you'd think if you had a conscience, you'd care a hell of a lot more about that, wouldn't you?
You would. You would think.
Yep. But no, they're more interested in using mafia-type punishments for the people that were stormed the Capitol building. And I even received a letter from a nincompoop that listens to this show saying, you were so wrong to say that the majority of the protesters were taking selfies and carrying a Trump banner and were just overweight middle-class folks that ought not to have, you could just tell by their expressions, that they didn't care anything more than the photo op. They roamed around and they left. And he showed, of course, the video of the single most vicious moments inside of the Capitol. I thought I was pretty clear, which is what I said was the vast majority of the videos, and I watched probably 10 hours of it because it was just such an amazing thing, and I wanted to see what the response was going to be of our country. And 95% of the Trumpites, and I'm not going to credit them at all. I think that to be there in Washington and protesting an election you think was stolen without considerable evidence to support your position. I mean, there is considerable reason to think that when we went to these new mail-in ballot procedures where there is no verification of the voter and somebody could vote multiple times, and you could bring in a bunch of these mail-in ballots that a team of people could have filled out for tens of thousands of votes. Well, it was rife for corruption. And while corruption probably took place, because the ballots are destroyed the moment that they are certified, there is no proof. And because there's no proof, just because you suspect that is likely, doesn't prevail. And so I think that people that were there protesting, I think even Trump talking about the election being stolen, unless you're able to physically prove it based upon retaining the ballots and demonstrating, if we had a method of doing it, and that's the problem, we do not have a method of validating these mail-in ballots. We just don't. And so you can't prove it one way or another. And so you just shut up. So I think that having those kind of rallies was dumb. I think being political is dumb. Carrying a Trump banner when the guy is a narcissist and says so many stupid things is exceedingly dumb. So all those things said, 95% of the people were just stupid, and they were out for photo ops and milling around with like-minded people. 5% of them, the ones that broke into the U.S. Capitol, what they did was criminal. What they did should be prosecuted. Those that the 1% of that 5% that were wielded a club or were pushing the cops or spraying pepper spray or mace, fortunately there's cameras everywhere, they ought to be put in jail. What they did was exceedingly inappropriate. And they were unbelievably destructive for their own cause. And there was one person killed by a cop shooting a gun, and that's one of our problems. We have way too many armed police agencies in America. And so the girl that was killed by a cop. But the one cop that was killed, I don't know what the circumstances were. We've never seen a video of what actually occurred. Shame on those that were responsible for them. But my comments are absolutely accurate. 95% of those people were there for a photo op. They were stupid. But if you compare them to Black Lives Matter,
And burning down two blocks.
Yes, where there are videos of them taking people out of convenience stores, and then 3 or 4 thugs dragging them out and kicking their brains in, going with weapons against cops, driving cars into people, not only looting businesses that they had no grievance against, and then burning them down and burning down police headquarters. They're exceedingly dissimilar. And the Black Lives Matter protests, well, a lot of the protesters were just misinformed nincompoos. They do not have a cause. There is no justification whatsoever for Black Lives Matter, because 93% of black murders are perpetrated by 13% of the population, fellow blacks. You have no justification whatsoever for your cause. So they're nincompoops, just like the Trumpites, and the majority of those that march are just fellow nincompoops. But the organizers condoned, justified looting. They condoned and justified arson. They condoned and justified attacking police. These things are
and now they're nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yes. But
I think once Yasser Arafat won that award became meaningless.
We have put ourselves in a position where I happen to agree with you, JP, where we are just incapable of putting things in context and making moral judgments. And so the realization that the media and people went on a witch hunt to hunt down and now they want to prosecute those that were inside the Capitol on legal conditions that were used for the mafia to artificially elongate jail terms. And this is just stupid. And so what's happened is it's become exceedingly difficult to have a conservative view of government, which is I want less of it, and to be able to express it without condemnation. And you can't do it now in social media, and the social media has become the policing agency for the online world. Very sad as to what has happened to the lack of free speech, the lack of freedom, the lack of being able to evaluate things in context. So I'm, Black Lives Matter being nominated for the Peace Prize with how unpeaceful they were and how they are marching for a cause that's the antithesis of what they are protesting. Blacks kill other blacks. Whites kill exceedingly few blacks. And so if you want to protest and say Black Lives Matter, then point the finger at yourselves. Yeah. This is just the reality. This is the reality of it. Let's always remember that evidence and reason prevail, and your opinions aren't worth a shit. Think it through. Stop it with your in the liberal world. Only thing that matters is what's politically correct, because it is stunningly incorrect. Well, we're in the midst of the story of Adam and Chawah and their greatly screwing up. We had finished last week the way that Hasatan misappropriated Yahweh's testimony. He essentially said the opposite of what God said. So what if God said you can't eat from any tree in the garden? That's not what God said at all. And so what if God said is the essence of it? He happens to be God. And we do have the opportunity to say, so what if God said? He gave us that freedom. But if we choose that freedom, there's a consequence, as there is with everything else. Just as Yahweh did not have a forbidden fruit. There was no fruit that's forbidden. There isn't even a Hebrew word for forbidden. God said you can eat from any tree you want to. You can even eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It's just that if you do, there's a consequence. Nonetheless, the woman played right along, and it says here, the woman looked and saw that the tree, she doesn't even name it here, but it's the tree of the knowledge of good and bad. It was beautiful and pleasing, pleasant, beneficial, productive. That's how she saw it, as a source for food to consume. You really think she was hungry?
No.
No, I don't think so either. And that it was visually appealing and desirable, even enticing cravings. You think that might have been the issue?
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty. So she coveted Shabbat. She lusted for. She intensely desired. It's an emotional response. She wasn't here, I'm going to think it through, and as I think of the pluses and minuses of adding this one tree to my diet in addition to all the other trees, and how much healthier and happier I'm going to be. That wasn't what she was doing. No. She lusted. She desired. This was an emotional response, the tree. And she wanted to impart the insights, inspire success, convey understanding. Isn't it always interesting is that people want the short answers?
Mm-hmm.
I had three young people here on my veranda this evening with the sunset. Two young men who work as part of their own landscaping company. They're really delightful young men. And one of them and their father was here 4 or 5 days ago, and we went through the whole explanation of what we're writing and what we share, and fascinated. I gave both of them a book, and so they brought their brother and their brother's fiance by this evening. We went through the covenant. What God's asking, what He's offering in return, who He is, and while they were all ears and listening, you could see that there were times I just want the short answer. Who is God, and what are the conditions to participate in the covenant? But it's interesting when it got to circumcision. You could see he didn't respond. And she said, well, that's just it. There's not a reason for it. I said, well, I shared a reason for it. It happens to be part of the male anatomy that's responsible for conception, conceiving children. And so it's our way of remembering. And for women, the way that they said, well, what about women? I mean, it's not a sign for women. Isn't that fair? I said, well, the fact of the matter is that female genital mutilation is an exceedingly negative thing, where a man being circumcised is better for their health and for their pleasure and for everything else. So it's healthy even for the woman. So what God is recommending is good for the man. If He were recommending it, would be bad for the woman. So that's why He doesn't say it. But, the fact of the matter is, that the instruction, after Yahweh gave the instruction to Abraham and said, you want you to be circumcised. From that point on, Yahweh's instruction was, parents, circumcise your sons at 8 days. Well, God had already said to Towrah, as a consequence of what you've done, raising children is going to be hard. It's going to be a really challenging thing that you're going to undertake here. It's women that are going to be cleaning that son's body. It's going to be reminded by it. They're going to be reminded all the time, I made a commitment to God to raise this child so that they will know the truth about God. And so that is the woman making that commitment to raise that child to know Yahweh and to emotionally support and desire that child's father. So that father is an important part of that child's life. And so women are making a major decision in this regard. It's not only men. And, then I went on to say that the covenant is about being set apart. You're set apart from human religious schemes and political schemes, all the things that are popular among men. You're being set apart from those and unto to God, circumcision is about cutting, creating a divide, setting us apart from the common. And so it's God's way of saying you're either in or you're not in. And it's your choice. You don't have to do it. But if you don't do it, you're not in. If you do it, at least you have the opportunity to take advantage of the other conditions of the covenant. JB, you did a whole long story on that. How do you explain? What more do you share with people about why God chose circumcision?
That sums it up right there.
Yeah. My tendency, of course, is to say, what do you care why? Mm-hmm. He did. The fact is, he did. And it's his house. And he's not taking anything from you if you choose not to do it. And he's offering you eternal life and adoption into his family and perfection, enrichment and empowerment if you do. Why would you even question why he wants it? I mean, that is my inclination is to say that, but I don't.
Pretty cheap buy-in.
Yeah, it's a pretty cheap buy-in. That was kind of why I started doing the research I did on it. Was it came clear this is his instruction was clear. And I kind of did want to know why, and that's why I started researching it. I'm like, because it was something just a little different than anything else, in terms of it being something that you physically have to do. So I'm like, it's clear that he said this, so I think it's important to understand why he would want us to do it. So I decided to do that and research that myself.
I'm going to go one step further.
Also,
go ahead.
Okay. No, I was going to say there is something that it is a mark that most people will not see, other than the family, the wife, and as opposed to a mark on the forehead where the whole world will see it. So it wasn't to show off to the world or to promote it to the world once again, but it was between you and me and her. I mean, God being
so for a man later in life, you want to be part of the covenants between you and God. Period. That choice is between you and God. Period. But in terms of a circumcised man being part of the covenant and his wife either considering or being part of the covenant, it's between the two of them, and that is how we raise and nurture children and support them is in a family like that. And so it's a reminder between them, but it's also a huge reminder when we see our child that we made this decision regarding them for this reason. We wanted them to be cut into the covenant family. And I even told her, I said, listen, if you choose to be part of the covenant and you have your son circumcised and before your son is old enough to make this conscious decision, then your son inherits your decision, will be part of the covenant family because of this decision you and your husband have made. I view it as it's a very personal reminder in the family situation and between us and God of the commitment that we have made to be part of the covenant, and the symbolism is that the cutting is a part of the male genitalia that is responsible for conceiving children, and it is a cut is how we describe the covenant, and it's a separation. I think there's one other thing, and maybe I'm just too wrapped up into it right now, but when you read Galatians, Paul from the beginning of Galatians to the end of Galatians is desirous of destroying the credibility of the Torah and of its covenant, and the basis of doing so is circumcision, because circumcision, he says, is of the flesh is bad, and therefore if you're circumcised you can't be saved. That's Paul's mantra. It became the most popular religion in the history of mankind, and its founding father says, if you are circumcised, then you cannot be part of the covenant. You cannot be saved. So this was a litmus test for God saying, well, if that's your choice and you're going to believe that idiot, now we have a tangible way of knowing who doesn't belong. in heaven.
Because God's view was literally the exact opposite. He said, if you are a male and you are not circumcised, you have nullified my covenant.
Yes, yeah, and he said one of the worst things that he says that my people have ever done is to invite uncircumcised men into my house. No, there'll be no uncircumcised men in heaven. It's just what God said. And he's also, as he said, it's not just for entry into the covenant that you need to be circumcised. You have to be circumcised to participate in Passover.
Yep.
And I think that's God actually being kind, where and the three young people that were on our veranda this evening understood that. I said, if God allowed an uncircumcised person to participate in Passover, which is the gift of eternal life, that would be an exceedingly bad thing. And they said, oh, yeah, I get it. No, you wouldn't want to be immortal and be separated from God, because then you're going to go to Sheol. And they understood that if you simply reject God, your soul dissipates at the end of your life. But there is a place of eternal incarceration for those that lead people astray. And circumcision became the litmus test for the most popular religion in the world.
So how does Paul say what he said, and then knowing that he's circumcised?
Yeah, I know, but the hypocrisy, Paul's hypocrisy, is stunning.
Yeah.
Everything
His
Paul
hypocrisy
does,
knows no bound.
Yeah, he can't. Yeah, see, there's no limit to Paul's willingness to contradict himself and to contradict God, or to be a total and complete hypocrite. I was translating Shabbat. I'm really stalled now on Volume 3. I'm in the second to last chapter of Volume 3 of Questioning Paul, and I'm retranslating Shabbat. And wouldn't you know it, what I did not see the first time through is Yahweh used a word in his introduction. This is in Shabbat 1, I think 3. And he says specifically that this lone individual that is going to try to paralyze the effectiveness of my covenant, and the effectiveness of my Torah. This person is going to try to neutralize and paralyze the effectiveness of the Torah. That this individual is going to represent a demonic spirit that seeks to be worshipped as God.
Wow.
I didn't see it the first time that I translated it.
Yeah.
And what it does is that first, there's only 2 or 3 people who became infamous, because it also says that their proclamations will be public and right out in the open. There's only a handful of people who have tried to do that, and it also says in this opening statement that this individual's angle of attack is going to be the justification for vindication. And their justification for vindication is going to be so perverted and so corrupt and so twisted that that no one's going to see life as a result of what they have done. But it specifically says this individual is going to work on behalf of and be inspired on behalf of a satanic influence. So it's far more indicting of Paul than what I had previously thought. Anyway, so much now for circumcision, but that's, again, where all of those are good reasons, and God is very clear that his covenant is set apart, and therefore we need to demonstrate that we are set apart and this is our signature. The fact of the matter is, it's his universe. He conceived life. He gave life to all of us and free will to all of us as a gift. And he says, if you want to extend it, you want to live with me, you want to be adopted into my family, you want all these benefits, these are my 5 conditions. And, he could have said, dancing on your head is a condition, if that was what entertained him. It really doesn't matter what he said or the condition. It's his home. I'm curious, so I always try to figure out what are the reasons for things. And, those are my answers. I think those are your answers as to what the reasons for. And I always like to be able to provide an explanation. But the fact of the matter is, God doesn't owe us one.
Yeah.
We don't have to accept. And there may be something.
You have to work hard to even find the question. I mean, hardly anybody's looking at the question, so it's not obviously.
Right. Yes, and of course, Christian apologists would say, "Well, I can't believe that God would keep some old poor guy out of heaven just because he couldn't afford it or decided that he didn't want to be circumcised." And, well, why not?
Yeah.
Okay. Then the woman looked and saw that the tree was beautiful and pleasing as a source of food to consume, and that it was visually appealing and desirable, even eliciting cravings. Then she coveted the tree to impart insights, inspire success, and convey understanding. Yeah, just give it to me. I want it easy. Yeah, it's not such a good idea. Therefore, she grasped hold of and seized and ate. Then she also gave it to her man, who was in a relationship with her, and he ate. No indication of Adam ever saying, "Wait a minute, this is a bad idea." Hey, Chawa, lucky for us, God told us about eating from this tree in the imperfect, which means we have to make a habit of eating from it before it even matters. So just set down the fruit. Just set it down, toss it aside, throw it back underneath the tree. We'll tell Yahweh we're not going to do it anymore. It's all going to be good. Nothing to worry about. That's what he did. He didn't even say to Yahweh, "I'm not so sure this is a good idea. Maybe I'll join you because we're together on this, but I think this is a bad idea." No, what even is that? Not a question, not a statement. Just did it, went along. That's very indicative of human nature, don't you think?
Mm-hmm. Especially men.
Lacking any information to the contrary, the implication is that Adam lacked the good sense and character to challenge the majority opinion. If so, he represents most people today. They lack the character, the courage, the conscience to take on an unpopular stand, even when it is against something decidedly bad, even when it's good to do so. Listen, I realize that when I mock the stupidity of liberalism and of organizations like Black Lives Matter, that it offends a lot of people. But it's right to say it. More government is not the answer. It's the problem. Black lives do matter. And because they matter, blacks ought to be protesting against the culture, their own culture that has caused that problem. And to be looking internally as opposed to pointing the finger external. So there's a lot of times that we just we're unwilling to go where the evidence leads. And we want to create a conspiracy to blame someone else. And that's what Black Lives Matter is. It's a conspiracy to blame someone else. Even liberalism, to a large degree, is, that if those who are successful don't pay their fair share. Well, actually, they pay way more than their fair share. But nonetheless, evidence and reason don't matter. People will say, well, we need a minimum wage because it's a living wage, and tough that we'll lose a bunch of jobs. Well, the government will step in, I guess. Now they're trying to unionize Amazon, and they got the White House involved, and the White House told Amazon employees, "You darn well better not speak against this. I don't want to hear anyone proposing that unionizing is a bad idea."
Really?
Wow, yeah. What Biden said.
My God.
Yep.
So free speech doesn't count either, huh?
Nope. We don't have free speech in America anymore. It's liberal views are acceptable. Conservative views are not.
If I may, let me interrupt one quick second.
Yeah.
If I may, in our neighborhood, we have a lot of the Black Lives Matter signs. And the people that, some of my neighbors I've gone up to, and I say, when did Black Lives not matter?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, did you grow up? I asked them pointedly. When you grew up, did you not care that? Did you not think because they were black people, they didn't matter?
Right.
And they said, well, no. I said, well, who are we talking to? And then I got into the 93%. You know, obviously Black Lives matter less to a black population than they do to a white population. And then if you buy the revisionist history of the Civil War was fought over freeing the slaves, then you have to realize that thousands upon thousands of people died setting them free. So I would say they mattered then. So what's your argument? Why do you have this sign? Why do we need this sign? And they just look at me like, go away.
Yeah. Who enslaved the blacks that came here to the Americans?
The Muslims.
They
stole them off.
The Muslims didn't enslave them; they just make a market of them.
No, they just bought them. They bought them.
Yeah, they bought them and sold them.
Joseph. Yeah.
Yes, which of course encouraged more.
To the British who shipped them. To the British who shipped them, and
slavery is a bad thing. But if you want to talk about people who have a right to complain, it's Jews. I mean, Jews were enslaved as recently as the 1940s. We're not talking about the 1840s. We're talking about the 1940s.
Yeah.
All right?
Yes.
And not enslaved in the sense of, well, if you try to escape, we're going to whip you. No, we're going to starve you and beat the living shit out of you, even if you do work.
I hope you die. Yeah.
And if we don't feel like you can work, we're just going to put you right to the gas chamber. Now, if you want a group of people that has the rights to protest against slavery, it's Jews. It's not blacks. It's been a very long time. And reparations have been paid over and over and over again through the welfare state, and welfare distributions, trillions. So, if you want to have a better life, stop blaming other people and take responsibility. Value the educational opportunities that you have. Groom yourself, dress yourself appropriately.
Build some.
Learn to speak appropriately, and go out and work. You should see the young people that are part of the team that I have doing the remodel here. They're wonderful, great attitude. They're articulate. They want to talk. They minds are full of questions. They speak well. They obviously got character. I'm not blaming anybody for being disadvantaged because they're not disadvantaged. Opportunity prevails, and there's even more opportunity in a politically correct society than there for minorities than there are for Caucasians. So stop blaming other people. Take responsibility. Had Adam countered the adversary's enticing solicitation by correctly citing our instructions, all would have remained good. Had he encouraged Towrah to simply set down the fruit, remain by his side in the garden, they would have continued living with God in that environment. Such is the benefit we all share, because Yahweh conveys almost all of his instructions in the imperfect, saying that its ongoing behavior as it relates to killing, its ongoing behavior in terms of coveting and stealing and failing to properly observe the specialness and celebrating the Shabbat. It's ongoing behavior. The moment you stop, you're all fine. That's all they had to do is set down the fruit, and they'd have been fine. Well, Adam would ultimately have his relationship with Yahweh reconciled, and likely for this reason. In general, most people in this situation will die rather than experience the anguish of eternal separation. And it is one thing to encourage others to reject God, which means that you're going to spend eternity in Sheol. and yet another to respond to them. Now, those who promote mischaracterizations of Yahweh, don't even use his name, will be held accountable for robbing others of their soul. As a result, Sheol will be a much more popular place than Shamayim. Now, covetousness is what caused Satan to rebel against God. He wanted to rise above the Most High and to be worshipped as God by men, something he achieved in Islam and Christianity, something which is made abundantly clear in Yeshayah, Isaiah 14. Giving us an insight into his fall, we see Satan beguiling Towrah into coveting what God has forbidden as well. He said, if you eat this, you're going to be like God. Well, that's what got her into trouble. That's what got him into trouble. The result is always the same. If you covet what is God's, if you seek to take what is God's, like, for example, saying, I don't like circumcision, so I'm going to reject that, but you still expect God to save you. Then you're playing God. And that's going to get you into trouble. So as we read the consequence of this choice, be aware that the protective covering of the garden is symbolic of the set-apart spirit in her garment of light. A moment Adam and Towrah chose poorly, they lost this protection and thus appeared naked in God's eyes, as well as their own. The garment of light precludes Yahweh from seeing our faults, making us appear perfect while eliminating that which would be considered bad. So this is Bereshith, Genesis 3:7. So the eyes, the perceptions, and the perspective of both of them were opened. You gain perspective when you know good and bad. So they were now able to comprehend more than they knew previously. And they recognized as a result that they were naked and exposed. And so they stitched together fig foliage, acting to make for themselves a covering. The fig, of course, is symbolic of a restored Yisrael, which is important because the name speaks of individuals who engage and endure with God. So even in the fall, there's a promise to rise. Adam and Towrah had seen each other naked countless times. We even got that's nice from Adam. I like her. And they never had any malevolent thoughts, but now they felt exposed and vulnerable. The addition of bad had become a burden. So to know good and bad is a burden because they knew good, so all they were gaining was bad, and that was a burden. It corrupted their relationship. The relationship was perfect, and now it's not. And if you're going to be eternal, you need to be perfect. They weren't anymore. It's curious that the one thing they came to realize from the access to greater knowledge was that they were now unprotected and thus vulnerable. Isn't that interesting? They seemed to know that there would be no protection from the carnage taking place outside of the garden. Now, in the next statement, most English Bibles are wont to render La Ruach HaYom as in the cool of the day. I guess one nincompoop decided that Ruach was cool, and all the little monkeys decided to go along. Well, La doesn't mean in, and Ruach doesn't mean cool. We've been doing this long enough that I think if I asked any covenant member what Ruach means, we'd have 99.99%. Why are you asking me? It means spirit, right? Everybody knows spirit. The Ruach Kodesh is the set-apart spirit. But there's bad spirit and good spirits, but it's still spirit. Different than soul. So I don't think there's anybody in our group that would not be able to translate law, which means to approach. It means concerning, regarding, or to approach and draw near. Ruach, which means spirit. Ha-yom, the day. So this one was not especially hard, and I don't know how the English Bibblers got it wrong, but they did. You know, one of the interesting things about this is just kind of funny. You know the literal meaning of yom?
Hot, right?
Yeah, that's right. It means to be hot. And therefore, would you say that in the cool of the day would be an oxymoron?
In the cool of the hot.
In the cool of the hot.
Yes.
In the
Very
cool
good.
of the hot.
Very good.
Yeah. Yep. Now, it's not that the translators don't know that ruach, what it means. It's correctly translated spirit 232 of the 378 appearances in the King James Version. It is rendered cool only once, and that being here in Bereshit, Genesis 3:8. And since Satan is a ruach, there was a spirit to be concerned about on this occasion, rendering cool a really poor choice. During the entire process of betrayal, there has not been a single reference to Yahweh's name. Isn't that interesting? Not one. Yahweh's name is used in like every other sentence up to this point, and it will be after this point. But in the process of betrayal, no reference to Yahweh's name. You know why? It's really hard to tell Yahweh, I don't give a hoot what you said. I'm going to do it anyway. If you know Yahweh's name, you know him, and it's just not going to be, you're going to have to obfuscate that, you know, God's really knowable and you have a personal relationship, he has a name. I mean, people are able to ascribe all manner of horrible things to their pretend God and all sorts of things that aren't true about him. But if you really know his name, you're not going to say stupid stuff like, well, Yahweh is omnipresent. No, he's not. Well, Yahweh is in charge of everything, and it's all fate, and you will do whatever he wants you to do. No, he didn't. No, he won't. Well, Yahweh is all loving. Well, then, no, you don't know him very well. Well, if you know him well enough to use his name, you know he's not all loving and should not be. So anyway, Yahweh's name doesn't appear in any of this. It is something this episode shares with Judaism. Oops. And with Christianity.
Oh, yes. Hashem. Jesus.
Yeah, Hashem or the Lord.
The Lord.
I was sharing with my friends today. I said, we know for certain there was no Jesus because there wasn't even a J until the 17th century. And the basis of Christ is Christo, which means to be drugged. And, oh, by the way, he wasn't Greek, so he could not have had a Greek name or a Greek title. Now, during the entire process, without Yahweh's name being mentioned, we have the recipe for rebellion, for being wrong, which is the nature of Judaism and Christianity, even Islam. And they heard the sound of Yahweh Almighty. So this is the first time we see his name. Walking in the protected enclosure regarding the spirit of the day. Therefore, the man, Adam, and his woman withdrew and hid from the presence of Yahweh as Almighty God in the presence of the garden's trees. Well, I guess if you were to read that and you had a rational mind, wouldn't you come to the conclusion that God was not omniscient or omnipresent? So how can Christians think that their God is omnipresent and omniscient, that he knows all, that he's involved in everything that's happening in your life, when this says very clearly
your fault, then.
They were hiding from God?
Where are they at?
Yeah, how can you hide from a God that is everywhere? How can you hide for a God that knows everything? God doesn't know everything, and he is not everywhere. If he was everywhere, he could not be set apart. Enter back to the discussion on circumcision. Set apart. He has to be uniquely in a place, or he is not set apart from the common and mundane. And God has to choose not to know most things, because if he knew everything, there would be no reason to even play out human history. There could be no free will if he knew everything that we were going to do before we did it. There'd be no purpose in having a relationship with us if he knew everything. What would he gain from it? I mean, it's like programming a computer or a robot to go in a circle all the time and then say, Captain Kirk, I think you are really swell, and I like your friend JB. Captain Kirk, I think you're really swell, and I like your friend JB. Captain Kirk, I think you are really swell, and I like your friend JB. It's just programmed, nothing but irritating. Nothing but irritating. And so God can't know. He chooses not to know. And he can't be everywhere, as he could not be set apart. And that's what this says. And I don't know why we don't want to think about that. And if God were manipulating everything in their lives, if God were manipulating everything in your life, do you not think that God would have said, hey, I'm not letting Satan in? Or when Yahowah reached up for the tree, he would have slapped her hand down. He's not micromanaging. Yeah, what'd I tell you? You don't listen to me. No, he's not micromanaging them. As a matter of principle, we should all listen to God now rather than later while being judged. The spirit of concern on this day was Satan, of course, and his errant citations and misappropriations of Yahweh's word. It was also Adam and Yahowah's poor choices. That was the spirit of this day. By reading this, we know that Yahowah was physically present with Adam and Yahowah. They were so familiar with him, they recognized his stride as he approached.
That's interesting.
And we know this because spiritual beings like Satan can move without walking, and they're silent.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, it's safe to say that this represents the first of what would become 7 appearances that Yahowah will make in material form. The final will be his return on Yom Kippurim, exactly 6,000 years distance from this day in 3968 BCE. Now, the reason a physical human manifestation of God is depicted here for the first time is directly related to Adam and Yahowah's current state. They had fallen, and they would benefit from a helping hand. They were also confused and bewildered and desperately needed God's guidance. Now, there are 3 interesting shadings to Shabbat, which is the word that was translated, they withdrew and hid, to withdraw and to hide, that are worth pondering. The plain rendering of the text conveys the consequence of rebelling against God. Those who do are separated from him, withdrawn. We're actually hidden from God, too. It would be counterproductive for God to know those who do not know him, because he would see lives squandered. God is telling us that this separation was their choice, not his. Further, the first couple was aware that they had made a poor decision and that their Nasama conscience helped them realize that they should feel a sense of remorse over what they had done. Even to this day, guilty people flee the scene of their crime and they try to hide from the authorities. Part of human nature, isn't it? We're seeing it here for the first time. Strong's lexicon tells us that Shabbat is the root of Shabbat, which means to fervently love and to cherish. So during their time in the garden, Adam and Yahowah had come to love Yahweh. They cherished their close personal relationship with him. So when they were beguiled by Satan's play on words, they recognized that they had hurt someone they cared deeply about, even revered. And I dare say God was hurt too. When we disappoint those we love, especially our parents, the last thing we want is to face them. Yahweh, who is God, Yahweh Almighty, Yahweh Elohim, called out to the man, Adam, and he asked him, Wa Amar Lahu, where are you? Why? And for what purpose are you in this position? Where are you? Are you halak, walking toward Yahweh, along the path he has provided? Where are you?
Not anymore.
Have you answered his kara invitations to meet and to be welcomed into his company? Are you like so many others, and especially Yehudim Jews, Chaba, withdrawing from God? Have you returned to the Gan Eden, Garden of Great Joy? Or are you still separated on the outside? Where are you? Separated from God, head swirling with all manner of ill-conceived notions, was the answer in Adam's case. His intimate relationship with God had been spoiled. A consequence of not listening to Yahweh and then choosing poorly. It is what happens to all those who are political, all those who are religious, all those who are even agnostics and atheists. They don't listen to God, and they choose poorly. Or they're religious and they're constantly yabbering away at God, telling God in their prayers what they want. They don't know what he wants. Don't listen to him. When we don't listen to God, we will choose poorly. If you listen to God and you get to know him as we do, you come to respect him and like him and have fun with him, then you're going to want to do what he says because you know it's in our best interest. And I kind of like making God happy. I think it's a really good thing.
Yeah.
He happens to be God.
Sometimes
he happens to have done so much stuff for us, and he's offering us the most amazing opportunity. He's asking so little in return. I think it's probably a really good idea that we make him happy.
Yes, sir.
Particularly when we're not obligated to do so.
That's true.
Now, there was a better answer. One which provides the way back home. Kara, which was translated called out. Yahweh called out to them, to invite them, to summon them, to meet and greet them, to welcome, even to read and recite. It's the basis of Mikra, the title Yahweh selected for his 7 invitations to be called out and meet, which in turn provide the benefits of the covenant and also the way back to the garden. As with Yahweh's 7 Mikra, God is summoning us to meet with him, just as he called out to Adam on this day. We're all invited. Where are you? Still echoes. Some weeks ago on this program, I shared some thoughts regarding Chawah's state of mind. We're not told, but it's in our nature to want to know. So I suggested a number of things, including the idea that she may not have enjoyed Yahweh's company to the same degree, might even have resented Adam's relationship with God. This extrapolation from the text remains viable based upon Yahweh's response. God was expressly seeking Adam and calling out individually to him. And rightfully so, Adam screwed up, far more so than Chawah. Adam had every reason to stand up and do the right thing, and he didn't. It still strikes me, and I'm almost haunted by what Abraham did with Sarah. Pimped out his wife to Pharaoh, and then a second time a second time. And the second time, God went to the king and said, listen, he's my guy, but he has misled you. Sarah is his wife. And I know that you haven't touched her, and I don't want anything bad to happen to you or your people. So you need to get her back home and get that done now. And I am certain that Yahweh did not want to have to intervene and do that, but he needed to. And I assume that Abraham got the message because he didn't do it again. But, man, God will go a long way to try to rectify situations. And he is not expecting us to be perfect. And I think on this day, if Adam had just say, Yahweh, I shouldn't have done it. I should have just told her to set down the fruit. And let's regroup and reboot here. And let's listen to God. And let's at least take this up to him and say, hey, this beautiful creature slithered into the garden and gave us this a different perspective. And let's talk it through. What was right? What was wrong? What would you have us do here? But they didn't. So this was Adam's response. He said, I heard your sound in the garden. And because I was naked and exposed, out of reverence and respect, I was concerned and I withdrew, having foreclosed something that I cherished. Shabbat. I moved away and hid. I retreated so as not to be discovered because I had withdrawn from someone that I had a loving relationship with. Now, they had adorned themselves with fig branches, and so he was not physically naked. So that's not why he withdrew. He was now bereft of the Spirit's garment of light and saw himself as flawed, vulnerable, exposed, mortal. And can you imagine being in God's company and knowing that he could see right through you and all of your faults? One of the things that I relish about my relationship with Yahweh is that I know that from his perspective, he sees me the same way he saw Dode, which was through this garment of light. And so he's able to see the positive things and the insights I've been able to glean and my enthusiasm for his word, and both to learn from it and to share it. And he can see those things. But he can't see the less than desirable attributes, and so I'm not uncomfortable in his presence. He made it possible for us to be comfortable around him by not hiding, but obliterating his ability to see anything that is less desirable by this garment of light. Well, Adam had enjoyed that, and now Adam was vulnerable. And I'd tell you, I wouldn't want to be around God, knowing that
no
some of my choices, some of my responses and thoughts were less than ideal. In life, it's appropriate to fear our Heavenly Father when we have rejected him, when we know we're going to be judged by him. And reverence, which would be our natural inclination towards the Father in the covenant, can only change to fear if we know that God's going to judge us. And if we're part of the covenant, we're never going to be judged. But if we choose not to be part of the covenant, we're likely to be judged. I say likely because I don't know if there's going to be an awakening or a purpose for judging those who did not mislead others, but simply were misled. Are they going to be awakened and at least say, this happens to be Yahweh here. You chose not to know him. You didn't lead anybody astray. So there'll be no eternal punishment. But there you go. Goodbye. That doesn't seem quite fair. It becomes a little more fair if you're dealing with the chosen people, for example, during the Inquisition or during the long duress under Roman Catholicism in Europe or during the Holocaust, and they should have the opportunity to see that those who tormented them being held accountable. Mm-hmm. So even though they have not accepted the terms and conditions of the covenant and aren't going to live forever with Yahweh, and they certainly aren't going to Sheol as victims, it would be right for them to see Yahweh punish those who they were powerless to stop at the time. But for the most part, I just don't see why God would want to judge anyone other than those who he's going to convict.
Really
or if there's or if there's a judgment case as to whether or not somebody should be convicted or just be allowed for their soul to pass.
Can I say something real quickly about Yahweh?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It was interesting. I was looking it up today just to confirm once again, because there's always that debate on whether it's fear or revere. Mm-hmm. The first time the word appears in Bereshith, which is here, it says it's fear, but it's in the context of them in the garden and they are hiding. The second time it's used in Genesis 15:1 is Yahweh says to Abraham, "Do not fear, I am your shield." That tells you where you are. I mean, if you want to know how to translate it, from God's perspective, God never said fear. He said, "Don't fear me." Right. You know, and they were feared but they had already walked away from him. That was in their own mind why they chose to fear him.
Right. So when they separated from God by not heeding his advice, not listening to him, they were out of reverence. They were concerned. They were fearful of God for the first time. And yet, when God is establishing the covenant with Abraham, he says, "Do not fear." Mm-hmm. So that is the definition there. Yeah. So if you've done something where you have not listened to God and you're estranged from him, fear is the right way to translate Yara. And if you are part of the covenant relationship, revere is the right way to translate the word. So, in life, it is appropriate, therefore, to understand that in the covenant, there's no reason to fear outside of the covenant. There's only reason to fear if we have done something deliberately to lead somebody away from Yahweh. By the way, it is possible here that Adam contributed to Chawah's mistake. And that could be one of the reasons that he was afraid. Yeah, he could have contributed.
Yeah, sure.
Well, as a result, Yahweh is one of the Torah's most important words. As you've said, you've looked at the first times it's used, which explains how it should be translated. It can be rendered revere or fear, concepts which are mutually opposed. On one side, it conveys the awesome respect and adoration we have for Yahweh. On the other, it speaks of great stress, dread, and concern, even intimidation, which naturally results from being in an unfavorable circumstance in the presence of such a perfect individual. Each of the 600 times that Yahweh appears in the Torah Navi wa Mizmor context, circumstance, and understanding whether to render the word revere or fear. Now, I am concerned that the dichotomy inherent I'm actually convinced that the dichotomy inherent in Yahweh is by design. Just as translators must choose whether to render it fear or revere, we're all given that same choice. If we separate ourselves from God, then he is to be feared, because he is judge and jury. Since his standard is perfection, those without a godly pardon will be found guilty and sentenced to death or worse, damnation. Such circumstances will be intimidating and should be dreaded. But for those who answer his invitations and will avail themselves of Yahweh's covenant, for those who are adopted into their Heavenly Father's eternal family, there will be only reverence, respect, and unmitigated adoration at his awesomeness. Also, speaking of words with a light and dark side, we know why Adam selected Shabbat. Having shown a disregard for Yahweh's guidance, he had Shabbat withdrawn from something he had once cherished.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Shabbat completes the equation, revealing that Adam was hiding because he had hindered a loving relationship. A wise individual, one who genuinely understands, seldom asks a question which they do not know the answer. And by asking a question rather than making a statement, they're encouraging those they are addressing to think and be accountable. So Yahweh asked, he said, "Who approached and reported to you that you were without adequate clothing, naked and exposed? Did you eat from the tree which, for the benefit of the relationship, I provided instructions for you not to be defined by eating from it?" Really interesting. Not to be defined by eating from it. It's blithe, a call. To make an exception and disassociate from consuming that which will actively and demonstrably consume you. Eating away at you. So the call infinitive. The call means that this relationship is genuine. The infinitive is a verbal noun, which establishes a relationship here through ingestion. So you become what you eat as a verbal noun.
Call to the action. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I provided instructions so that you would not be defined from eating from it. Now, Shawa, I provided instructions, very similar to Torah, and that it conveys the idea of providing instructions, offering directions, and conveying an informative message. Today, Yahweh's Torah serves as our owner's manual, one which provides instructions for us to get the most out of life. When we follow the manufacturer's directions, everything works the way it was designed. Best of all, if something unexpected happens along the way, we always have the maker's warranty to rely upon. Gives us a lot of comfort, confidence in life, doesn't it? I shared today that I probably have 10,000 death threats against me, and everybody else ducks, and I said, why would you do that? I've never ducked, not once. When you have the manufacturer's warranty, you rely on it.
Very good.
Yeah.
And it's a reliable manufacturer, too.
It is. It's highly reliable, exceedingly dependable.
And
pays out 100% of the time. Yeah, pays out 100% of the time. Literally life assurance. The only difference between us today and Adam is that he relied upon the spoken word, and we have the written Torah and guidance of God available to us whenever we need it. Had Adam or Chawah been similarly blessed, they could have opened the book and compared Satan's testimony to Yahweh's and recognized that the adversary was lying. But we have this opportunity today. And yet, very, very few people take advantage of it.
Yeah, that's sad.
Yep. In this specific example, God is saying that if we trust him and do as he instructs, he warns that we will live in paradise with him just as we were designed. But if we do not follow his instructions, he is warning that there will be an undesirable consequence, which means we will embody what it means to die. The choice is ours. But alas, man has never been very good at accepting responsibility. Bereshit 3:12. Adam said, "The woman you gave me to be with me, to make the relationship better, but she offered it to me from the tree, so I ate. By the way, every word of that was true. Adam's credit, every word of that was true. Mm-hmm. To his shame, he was wrong and failed to take responsibility. Yes, Yahweh gave man the gift of woman. But he gave us so much more. He gave us a nesama and a nefesh. So with our nesama, we could observe and then respond to the world around us. And with the nefesh conscience and free will, we could make responsible choices. And then he gave us his Torah guidance so we could make the most of our opportunity. So Adam just said, the woman you gave to be with me to make the relationship better. She did. Her. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. Well, the ultimate gift. You know, I look at my relationship with my wife and I say, there's no better gift in the universe. Thank you for that gift. She does make the relationship better. My relationship with Yahweh is better because of her. And so what Adam said is, that's true. The woman you gave me to be with me, to make the relationship better, all of that's true. It is true also that she offered it to him, and it's also true that he ate. But my goodness,
great spin, isn't it?
Responsibility. Yeah, I'm really sorry. I should have said, no, wait a minute. God said don't do that unless you want to accept the consequence. He didn't say don't do that. He said there's a consequence. I didn't want that consequence. I just said no. So in his reply, Adam is admitting to having squandered all of it, forfeiting his soul, his conscience, volition. What good is volition if you don't make a good choice? And he forfeited the instruction. No surviving the situation, no thought, no surveying what was transpiring, no reference to the guidance that he had been provided, no independent decision-making, no apology, no request for another chance, which I would have given in a heartbeat. No, just, hey, I got to own this one. I screwed up. To your credit, however, you did give me that instruction in the imperfect, so I'm gonna capitalize on that. I won't do it again.
Mm-hmm. Retake. Mulligan.
Yeah, I want a mulligan.
My bad.
Yeah, mulligan. I've always been fond of mulligans in golf. I given enough mulligans, even I.
I rely.
Well, we get to do them in tennis.
Yeah, that's right. So Satan had manipulated Adam and Chava into the culture of man, a cult which would take many forms over the millennia, but never really change. Men and women would form alliances with one another, some political, some religious, others militaristic, some economic, many conspiratorial, most embracing all of the above. Man was now listening and responding to his fellow man, not God. And it didn't take much, just the inference that men could be like gods.
There we are.
Yep, and we haven't changed. The first kingdoms, all of which would follow, were fascist. The king established the rules, owned most of the land, allowed only his most ardent supporters to possess the rest, controlled everyone's lives, was head of the religion, often considered a god, claimed a divine right to rule, and was, of course, commander-in-chief of the military. The people ate what they were given. Over the past 2 centuries, men, and more recently women, indoctrinated in the culture of man, have become such that we have been given many more opportunities, at least in America. We can vote for between 2 candidates, offered up by the competing political cults. Called democracy based on the myth that it existed in Greece and Rome, people unwilling to consider the guidance God has provided or take responsibility for themselves and to be accountable are bribed to vote for those who expand governance to enrich them. In so doing, they punish success, they reward failure. And we call that entitlements. Makes us feel better about stealing. As governments grow, man shrinks. As governments grow, man shrinks. In the collectivism of socialism, education becomes indoctrination and freedom an illusion, as economic progress is stifled. The cure is always propositioned as more of the same. It's called being progressive. Soon, it's all gone. Individual consciousness, good judgment, access to valid instruction, and with it the ability to make a reasoned decision. Man eats what he is given. Culture is the cause of most human failings. It has been a curse from its inception. The history of civilization is the story of war, of oppression and control, of subjugation, slavery and greed, of indoctrination and of sacrificing life and constraining freedom. For these reasons and more, Yahweh is opposed to human governance, religion, militarism, and conspiracy. He is an advocate of free enterprise over fascism, and its even more controlling twin, communism. And that is because he values human autonomy, freedom, work, individual responsibility, accountability. But for any of it to be vital, we must use our consciousness and our conscience, even free will, to listen to Yahweh's guidance and then make an informed and rational decision. Here we have an episode that occurred just shy now of 6,000 years ago. And in this dialogue, we can see ourselves. Mm-hmm. We can see where our relationship is with Yahweh, where it has gone awry, what humanity has done to obfuscate, to paralyze God's instructions. It really is just that simple. As governments grow, man shrinks. The story of civilization is the story of subjugation, of indoctrination, of limiting people's freedoms, such that man eats what man is given. It is the antithesis of what Adam did on this day, and yet it is what men still do today, which is the failure to make a rational and informed decision. That's I was talking again to these young people on my veranda this evening, is that just constantly reminding them that that the nature of religion is parents indoctrinating their children in their own beliefs, such that anybody challenges those beliefs, you attack that individual, as opposed to providing answers for their children or encouraging their children to question. And we just don't make very many informed, rational decisions today. Now, I keep on mentioning because it's so pervasive now in our culture, but Black Lives Matter exists because people are not making informed and rational decisions. And by the way, if you look at a Black Lives Matter protest, 2/3 of the people are white.
I know.
And everybody that's marching is doing so out of ignorance, and they're irrational. That's that. The most pervasive influence on the globe today is the deprivation of freedom and livelihood as a response to a virus. And the consequences of that, the murder rate in the U.S. is way up. It's unexplainable. It's so much higher than it's ever been before. Consequence. We have tens of millions of people out of work. We have an economy that we've put, $7-8 trillion into to stimulate, and is still in a great recession. We just don't think. We're so few people are willing to explore the evidence and to make an informed and rational decision. And almost no one can do it that is religious. So the very idea that God's first requirement for being part of the covenant is you leave that stuff behind, so at least you're open to the truth. Otherwise, you'll never be. You'll attack the messenger. What were you going to say, Kurt?
I was going to say the chairman of the board, of the central bank, he said that, or the Feds, he said that we've got 10 million people that will not return to work. They're not going to be able to. They can't possibly, by the time it takes them to get back to work or be retrained, if they could. And there's just not going to be any those type of service industries jobs enough. All those restaurants that have left, and on and on and on. So they're permanently on the dole.
Yeah.
He sloughed it off as if it didn't matter. And 10 million people matter. My God, they have no job.
Yeah. Particularly when you consider how few Americans work. 10 million people matters. And that's 10 million people who were employed, who are no longer employed, who have no hopes of being reemployed. And it's not people who have never been employed, have no interest in being employed. So there's a lot more than that the society is having to carry as a burden. Should you care for a dissenting view, blame it all on the woman. According to Muhammad, Allah made women stupid as a result of the woman's culpability. But I wouldn't trust him because Islam's lone messenger said that hell was filled with women hanging from meat hooks through their breasts because they were ungrateful to men. He claimed that the reason for different races and their different colors is because they match the dirt from which Allah extracted them. He also said the sun goes to bed in a muddy spring, exhausted, I suppose, because it spends all day racing the moon. Oh, and speaking of hell, it is the only place Allah is depicted in the Quran, indulging himself by torturing those who would not worship him. So I don't think that it's appropriate to blame him.
Good source.
Yeah. I mean, listen, clearly Towrah did not choose well. The more I've studied this, I think the fault lies with Adam, which is why Yahweh addressed him first. I think it was his responsibility. And if you particularly look at the consequence, when Yahweh went through and said, this is the consequence for each of you, it is, I think, exceedingly obvious that this consequence was directly derived from Adam failing to share what he should have shared with the Towrah. Listen, if you are in a relationship and you love the person you're with and they're doing something that is contrary to what is in their best interest, if they're doing something that's contrary to what God has said, it is our responsibility to say, please don't do that. Tonight, as I keep going back to this, because it's my life, sharing what Yahweh has shared with us. And I've got these three young people, plus my closest friend on the island is there as well. It's the first time he has heard all of this story. And everybody is on the edge of their seat listening to what God had to say. And Leah had made this extraordinary lamb dish. And because Shabbat evenings are special for us, we have dinner very early, and then we talk for a while, and we just enjoy one another's company. And then gradually I come here and I read through all the material we're going to cover for this show and think about what we're going to share. We kind of have a routine on our Shabbats. And this dinner that she had worked on since early this afternoon, it was really special what she had done with the lamb and the vegetables and the like. Well, it had been done for an hour and a half before these folks left, and yet I could not leave them. And rather than being frustrated that I had to spend all this time fixing this wonderful dinner and that I allowed it to get cold because I had prioritized these young people having the opportunity to know Yahweh, at least get them in the right direction, it is wonderful to be in a relationship where you says, you did the right thing. That's what you should be doing. That's the most important thing. The fact that the dinner got cold, it's immaterial to what that is. And so I think we just have a responsibility to be that kind of honest with one another, and it's very rare. So I think it's Adam's fault. I think that Adam shirked his responsibility in this regard. So then Yahweh, who is God, said to the woman, "Why did you do this? Why did you do this?" Now, if God was all-knowing, do you think you'd ask that question?
He wouldn't need to, would he?
No. And even if he knew the answer, still, you want her to think about it. Why did you do it?
Yeah.
Now, her answer was not very good. Her answer, quite frankly, was every bit as bad as Adam's answer. And the woman said, "The tempting and toxic creature deceived and deluded me, and I ate." Simple as that. Now, everything she said was true as well. And I want to tell you, her answer is much better than Adam's answer. She says, "I was deceived and I ate." No, she should have thought it through. But she at least took responsibility to the sense of, I was wrong. Adam didn't even go that far, did he? Adam said, "You gave me this woman." Adam is saying that God is wrong. Adam's taking almost a Pauline position in his letters. God is wrong. You gave me this woman. It's your fault. Yahowah is not saying that. He said, not even blaming God for allowing
in the garden.
Satan to come into the garden. She's not blaming him for that. She just said, he beguiled me, he misled me, and I ate. I can at least give her credit for that. Now, I would have liked for her to have said, I wish I had been better informed so that when when Satan misquoted you, that I could have responded more effectively. I wish I had was better equipped with that information and I had understood this, and that I wish that when I gave the fruit to Adam, I wish he had said, "No, this is not right for us. This is a bad decision. Let's just set this down. Let's stop, and everything will be fine." I would have loved her to have gone a little further, but she did just pass the buck and say, "Yeah, I was deceived. It's the deceiver's fault." So she didn't really accept responsibility either, although she admitted that she was wrong. It's one thing to say, "I'm wrong." It's another thing to accept responsibility. And clearly, she was complicit. She not only misquoted God, she wanted to become like God. She said, I look like I want that inspiration. Satan, the way that Satan prevailed with her, says, "You'll become like God." So she was complicit. Unlike man, she surveyed the situation, thought about it, made a conscious decision, and then passed her lapse in judgment onto Adam. What she did not do was compare what Satan had said to what Yahweh instructed. And then knowing that she had made a terrible mistake, she brought man down with her. She became what the adversary had projected. Now, this precipitous decline from good to bad occurred because of Nasha, delusional and beguiling deceptions. Culture, like civilization, is something we are conditioned into embracing as good, as uplifting, as enlightening humankind, thus making us more divine. It's a beguiling perception. Now, one last reference here to Black Lives Matter, but if you take those protests as an example, they claim that the culture is racist, that whites are suppressing and killing blacks. And yet the opposite is true. The problem is in the African American culture. As we know, the facts are that young black men, lacking proper guidance, are 8 times more criminally violent. 8 times than are others. Not 8%, 8 times. And when a black person is killed, 93% of the time the perpetrator is also black. Rather than blaming others for their mistakes, as Adam and Yahowah have done, and learning nothing, the only viable solution is to accept responsibility and then to strive to improve. You know, I've spent the last month rewriting Questioning Paul. I'm not rewriting Questioning Paul because somebody else made a mistake. I'm doing it because I made a mistake. I'm responsible for the mistakes that I made. I had no idea that Yosha was not the Son of God. I thought he was. I had thought that while Yosha was never called the Messiah, that a good term would be implement doing the work of Yah, which would be Messiah, which is the term that I use. But it's really never afforded to him. And I thought that because of the way that the Christian New Testament was written, that it would be Yosha that would be returning. I was wrong. And so, yeah, I was wrong. You know? There's a reason Yosha never calls himself the Son of God and instead calls himself the Son of Man. There's a reason that Yosha never announces that he is the
King
Messiah.
of Kings and stuff.
Oh, yeah, it doesn't say that he is the King of Kings. He doesn't say those things. And so it's, I guess it was a year or 2 ago that we began to take the Mizmor and the Mashal seriously, and learned from them that Yahweh has a son, which he says, he is my son, I am his father, and it's Dov. Yeah. There's a person that Yahweh says 3 different times, anoint him my Messiah. He is Messiah for my people. 3 times.
Yeah.
He has very specific instructions on it. I have chosen him. I want you to anoint him. He is the Messiah. So Dod is the Messiah according to God. And God refers to Dod as the King of Kings. And he specifically said, I'm coming back with Dod, and it's going to be the kingdom of Dod. Well, God says, if that's not all true, then call me a liar. He even says that Dod's going to come back as brilliant as the sun.
Brilliant as the sun like him.
So,
wow.
I didn't know those things when I was writing Questioning Paul, doing the second time through. And so I'm rewriting it because I erred. It's my fault. Would I like to be translating new material for Coming Home, Volume 3? Absolutely. But this is important. It's important for us to admit when we're wrong and to strive to correct it. Now, as it turns out, oh my goodness, am I learning new stuff, and I've become so much more pejorative. I mean, particularly as you move through it, all the gloves are off. I mean, I'm punching the ever-loving life out of the man. I'm writing some things that needed to be said right from the beginning that are really harsh, and deservedly so. And so it is actually, it's been a pleasurable experience, and I'm glad that I was given this opportunity to admit the mistake and to go on. And I'm so delighted we have such a wonderful team committed to getting the truth out. And that's what they should have done. That's what we have the opportunity to do. Learn the truth. Share the truth. When listen, if God chose Abraham with all of the bad behavior that Abraham went through and could perfect him, he can sure as heck use us. You know, if Moshe, who had murdered a man, for good reasons, by the way, I would have done the same thing. And, you know, I'm a nonviolent individual. Unless somebody is committing violence against a person who is helpless to thwart them. And I think that using violence to preclude somebody from killing somebody in your presence, that's about the only appropriate use of violence. And so Moshe had done that, but you know, Moshe, he had no interest of going back into Egypt. You look at Dod, and he did some really bad stuff. And look what Yahweh was able to inspire through him and his love for him. And so, you know, we all make mistakes, and God works with us and loves us in spite of it all, so long as we strive to be right with him and straightforward with him. And in the case of Adam and Chava, can you imagine how different it would have been if both of them had said, you know, Yahweh, you did tell us not to do that. This is what you said was not in our interest. We should have listened to you. We're sorry. It's our fault. We'd like a second chance.
Won't happen again.
Yeah. Even if it does happen again, we're going to come to you with exactly the same thing. We're going to say, okay, it's been wrong. been 1,000 years. Had a little lapse in judgment. Had a lot of good times. We'd like another mulligan. Yeah, he's got no problem with that. You know, he's not expecting that much from us. We do have the opportunity for mulligans. Lots of them. I mean, no one took more mulligans than Doug. The person that Yahweh formed the covenant with, man, his were mulligans in the sense of tearing up the entire golf course. He was really bad. So, yeah, Yahweh understands who we are, wants the relationship to work, and will sacrifice everything except his integrity for that to be so. So we ought to be very comfortable in our relationship with him, so long as we're just straightforward and willing to accept responsibility. Responsibility for learning, responsibility for our response, responsibility for sharing, because we have that responsibility. We all do. We know the truth. We have responsibility to share the truth. So I think we learn an enormous amount through what happened in the garden, what went wrong, how it has reverberated throughout human history, and what we ought to tell people so that they can understand that government is not the answer. Religion is not the answer. Misquoting God is not the answer. Wanting to be like God is not the answer. And understanding exactly who Satan is and how he manifests himself, seeking to be worshipped as if he were God. So much we can learn. Well, it's a wonderful Shabbat. I wish everybody the best for this evening. Look forward. We'll take off from this point again next week. And next week we'll be talking about what the consequences were because with each of them, Yahweh's going to say, because of what happened here, this is the consequence. There wasn't a penalty in the lot of them, but there were consequences. And so we'll go through what those consequences were and how they affect us, and then what happened with Towrah and the naming of her two sons, and what that relationship was like between Cain and Abel. What those names mean, what they did, how Yahweh responded to them, and what the consequence of all that is. And of course, then that's going to lead to something that is just such an amazing story. Yahweh grieving having created man, and then wanting to reset in the area of the Nesama, and what we learn about the nature of the flood that is so instructive to us today. And of course, the first symbol of the covenant, the rainbow, and what it means. Yep. So there's a lot to learn. I promise we'll have many more wonderful Shabbats together, and as we just continue to absorb the Torah of Yahweh, His teaching and guidance, and incorporate it into our lives. May Yah bless you all. You have a wonderful Shabbat. Look forward to being with you next week.
Shabbat shalom. Yes.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.